5 true liminal space horror stories you can't explain. I used to work the late shift at the campus library. It wasn't anything glamorous, just reshelving books, cleaning up after students, making sure no one tried to sleep there overnight. Most nights, I'd clock out a little after 1 a.m., when the campus was completely dead. The air always felt heavier at that hour, like even the buildings were asleep. My car was parked in the south garage, a massive concrete structure that always echoed, even when empty. That night was supposed to be just another routine walk, except something was off before I even stepped inside. When I reached the entrance, the fluorescent light above the door was flickering, slow, deliberate, like a heartbeat. The sign that said Level 3 entry buzzed quietly. I remember thinking I'd have to tell maintenance again. Inside, the echo of my footsteps stretched out longer than it should have. The concrete smelled damp, like rain. Though it hadn't rained in days, a cold breeze swept across the ramp, carrying the faint hum of what sounded like an engine. But every car was still. I pressed the elevator button, and the indicator glowed 3, then 2, then 1, as the car ascended toward me. When the door opened, the light inside was faintly yellow. There was something strange about that, too. Campus elevators were always bright white. Still, I stepped in. I pressed ground, expecting the usual mechanical jolt in the slow descent. Instead, the elevator hummed, and hummed, without moving. The floor number blinked between 3 and 2, like it couldn't decide. Then, after what felt like a full minute, it stopped. The door slid open to reveal the same level I came from, same yellow lighting, same empty cars. I laughed to myself, thinking maybe it was an electrical glitch. I stepped out, walked toward my car, silver Honda Civic, row D5, and noticed something that froze me mid-step. Every single car was covered in a thin layer of dust, including mine. It was the kind of dust you'd see on a car that hadn't been touched in weeks. I ran a finger across the hood. It left a clean line. The engine was cold. The doors were locked. Then I saw it. On the windshield, written in the dust, were the words, "You never left." My first thought was that someone was messing with me. Maybe campus security or a friend trying to scare me. But no one knew where I parked. I turned around, scanning the garage, and the fluorescent lights began to buzz louder. One by one, they flickered, until the far end of the level plunged into darkness. Something, or someone, moved there, not fast, just there, like a shape, watching, waiting for me to move first. I hit the elevator button again, desperate to get out. The doors slid open almost instantly, but this time, there were no buttons inside. Just a single sign above the door that said, "Down." I hesitated before stepping into that elevator. Something about the way the word "down" glowed, a dim, pulsing orange instead of the usual white, made me want to turn around and take the stairs instead. But behind me, the lights kept shutting off, one row at a time, like the darkness was following. So I stepped in. The door closed without me pressing anything. The hum started again, louder this time, lower pitched. It didn't feel like movement, more like vibration, deep in the bones of the building. The air inside was warm, heavy, almost metallic. Then the light flickered. Once, twice, and everything stopped. The door slid open. I stepped out and immediately knew something was wrong. The layout was exactly the same ramp angle, same columns, same cracked concrete floor. But all the signage was gone. No level 2, no parking space numbers, not even the emergency exit arrows on the walls. The only color came from a single flickering light in the far corner, where an old vending machine stood humming. I don't remember there ever being a vending machine in this garage. Still, I was desperate for any sign of normal life, so I walked toward it. The sound of my footsteps echoed unnaturally, like the space didn't end. Halfway there, I realized something unsettling. The echo didn't sync with my steps anymore. It was slightly delayed. Then, it added an extra step. Step, 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 step. I froze. My shadow stretched across the floor, and for a split second, I saw another one beside it, taller, thinner, facing the wrong direction. The hum from the vending machine grew louder, morphing into a low static hiss. I got close enough to see the glass panel. Empty shelves, no snacks inside, just darkness. But when I leaned in, the reflection didn't move. It stayed perfectly still, staring back at me even after I turned my head. I backed away slowly. The elevator behind me had closed on its own. Now the down sign was gone, replaced by a new word, faint, burned into the metal panel like rust. Lower. I slammed the button. The doors opened sluggishly, making a grinding sound. Inside, the walls looked different. The mirror in the back was cracked, and instead of yellow light there was this cold, pale glow, the kind hospitals use. I didn't even think. I just pressed my hand against the door frame, looked back one last time at the endless gray level, and whispered to myself, just get out of here. The elevator shut me in again. No music, no indicator lights, just that vibration, humming like something breathing behind the walls. And then, the elevator fell. Not quickly, but with that sick, weightless drop that made my stomach twist. It went on for too long. Way too long. When it stopped, I staggered forward. The doors opened to complete darkness. Only the faint red glow of an exit sign cut through the black, far away down the corridor. But it wasn't a corridor anymore. It was an underground tunnel, lined with dripping pipes and walls painted that same dull yellow, but smeared with what looked like handprints, hundreds of them, all pointing toward the elevator. The air in the tunnel was thick and wet. It smelled like old water and rust. Every few seconds a drop hit the floor with a hollow echo that carried too far, like the space around me was much bigger than what I could see. The exit sign flickered in the distance, and I decided that was my only way out. The ground was slick. The sound of my shoes echoed off the walls. The deeper I went, the more I realized that the tunnel didn't feel man-made. The floor started to slope downward, the ceiling dipping lower with every few steps. After about 50 feet, I reached the exit door. The red light above it was buzzing faintly. I reached for the handle, cold metal, damp, and pulled. It opened, but on the other side was another parking garage. Same layout, same concrete pillars, same yellow light flickering overhead. Only this time, there were no cars at all, just rows of empty spaces stretching into the dark. My heart sank. I stepped forward, leaving the tunnel behind, and turned around. The door I came through was gone, just a solid wall of concrete. That's when the hum started again. Low, rhythmic, pulsing through the air like distant machinery. I shouted, a stupid, desperate, "Hello?" that immediately bounced back at me, fractured and distorted. It came back deeper, slower. Not hello. It sounded like no. The echo repeated it again. No, 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 until it faded into a whisper that wasn't mine. I could feel my chest tighten. My phone was dead. The screen glowed white for a second and went black again. I decided to keep moving. There had to be stairs somewhere. I found them in the far corner. The sign read, Stairwell B. The metal door was slightly open. A single emergency light glowed above it. Inside, the staircase spiraled downward endlessly. The air was colder here, almost freezing, and the walls dripped with condensation. Every time I leaned over the railing, I saw my reflection in the metal below, smaller, darker, delayed by half a second. I took a deep breath and started walking down. Step by step, the sound of my own movement echoed up the shaft. But halfway down, I heard another set of footsteps, perfectly in sync with mine. At first I thought it was the echo, until I stopped. And the sound kept going, slowly, like something was descending toward me. The emergency light flickered. For a second, I saw a figure, far above, silhouetted by the glow from the door I'd entered. It stood completely still. Then, it tilted its head. The stairwell went silent. My instincts screamed. I bolted downward, skipping steps, my hand sliding across the cold metal rail. The light below grew brighter, and I aimed for it. Another door, half open, leaking pale white light into the stairwell. I threw myself through it and slammed it shut behind me. My chest heaved. The door rattled once, twice, then went still. I looked around, trying to catch my breath. I was back in the garage. Same cracked floor, same pillars, same car. Except this time, the dust on my windshield was gone, and written on the glass, in fresh finger marks, were new words. "You're going the wrong way." My throat went dry when I read those words. I wiped the windshield with my sleeve, hoping I'd imagined it. But the letters were smeared across the glass, still glistening as if they'd just been written. Someone, or something, was still here. The buzzing of the fluorescent lights grew sharp and erratic. A few blinked out entirely, leaving half the garage in shadow. The air felt thicker now, humming like a low electric current running through the concrete. I backed away from my car, every step echoing far too loudly. If this was some twisted prank, someone had gone to incredible lengths to pull it off. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that. The silence between the echoes felt alive, aware. I spotted the ramp leading upward and decided to take it instead of the elevator. If I could just reach the top level, maybe I'd see the streetlights again. As I walked, my footsteps began to sound wrong. Not solid, but hollow, like I was walking over an empty space. Halfway up the ramp, I noticed something odd. The air smelled different, less like exhaust, more like ozone and burnt plastic. And up ahead, faintly visible through the fog of light, I saw movement. At first, it looked like someone walking, but as I got closer, I realized the figure wasn't moving forward. It was standing still, and it was facing the wall. A man, or what looked like a man, wearing clothes that didn't make sense. His shirt was tucked in too neatly. His pants were outdated, like from the 70s, and his skin had that pale gray tone that reminded me of fluorescent reflection. Not real color, just light bouncing off. "Hey," I called out. No response. I stepped closer. His breathing was faint, shallow, mechanical, as if it was mimicking the rhythm of the buzzing lights above. When I got within 10 feet, he turned his head. Slowly, but not toward me. He looked upward, mouth slightly open. That's when I noticed something horrible. He didn't have eyes, just two deep shadows where they should have been. And in that same moment, all the lights behind me turned off. Instant black. I ran. I didn't think. I just sprinted back down the ramp. My footsteps collided with the echo, doubling, tripling, until it sounded like a dozen people chasing me. But when I looked over my shoulder, there was nothing. I reached the base level again, panting, shaking. The elevator doors were open, waiting. The word above the door no longer said lower. It said, ground. Relief hit me hard. I ran toward it and jumped inside. The doors closed fast, too fast, like they wanted me inside. I pressed the ground button again, just to make sure. The elevator began to move. This time, I felt it going up. My stomach lifted slightly as the hum rose in pitch. For the first time since this nightmare started, I actually smiled. I was getting out. I could almost see the morning light already. Maybe call security, explain what happened, laugh about it later. The elevator slowed, stopped, the doors opened, and I realized I wasn't on the ground floor. I wasn't anywhere close. Rows of cars filled the level, but they were all covered in plastic sheets, like they'd been preserved. The air smelled of dust and oil. Every license plate had the same date, July 17th, 1973. And right in front of me, sitting in the middle of the floor, was my Honda Civic. Exactly the same. Same scratches, same dent on the back bumper. But the windshield, it wasn't dusty this time. It was shattered. From the inside. I froze. The shattered glass glittered under the flickering light. Tiny shards scattered across the concrete like ice. My own car. From another time. From another version of me. I walked toward it slowly. The deeper I went into that level, the heavier the air became. It felt like walking underwater. The humming of the lights blended with the faint sound of an idling engine. Low, constant, impossible to locate. When I reached the car, I peered through the broken windshield. Inside, the driver's seat was empty, but on the passenger seat lay something that made my stomach twist. It was my ID badge. Same photo, same name, Same library access card clipped to it. Except the plastic was yellowed and cracked, like it had been sitting there for decades. My hands were shaking. I picked it up. The plastic crumbled at the edges, and underneath the badge, etched faintly into the seat fabric, were 4 words scratched in with something sharp. "You made it back." The elevator behind me dinged. That sound, that gentle, normal elevator chime, cut through the suffocating silence like it didn't belong there. I turned around. The doors were open again, the light inside no longer pale or yellow, but pure white. For the first time, it looked normal, safe. Every instinct in me screamed, "Don't trust it." But the thought of staying in this place another second made my chest tighten. I walked toward it, one slow step at a time. The white light spilled across the floor, washing away the flickering yellow glow around me. For a moment, I felt warmth on my skin again. When I stepped inside, I noticed something new. There was only one button. It said, EXIT. I pressed it. The door closed. The hum began again, but softer this time. Almost like a lullaby, the floor number ticked upward. 1, 2, 3, and then stopped. The door slid open. Cool air rushed in. I blinked against bright light, daylight, and the sound of birds, cars, and students laughing. The campus courtyard. I stepped out onto the pavement, the morning sun warming my face. It was over. For a few seconds, I just stood there, breathing, trying to steady myself. Everything looked the same. The buildings, the walkway, even the flickering light above the garage entrance. But then I noticed the sign. It didn't say Level 3 entry anymore. It said Level 41. And when I turned around to look at the reflection in the glass doors, I wasn't standing there. Someone else was. A version of me, still inside the elevator, staring back. The doors closed. The light above it flickered once, and the hum began again. Some places don't trap you with walls. They trap you with familiarity. You think you've left, but sometimes you're just one floor deeper. I've always loved working nights. The silence, the hum of the old fluorescent lights, the way the aisles seem endless once the students are gone. The university library was built in 1958, 6 floors of brick, metal, and glass. During the day it was alive, filled with chatter, printers, and the sound of people slamming coffee cups onto desks. But after 10 p.m., it became something else entirely. I was the last staff member every night. My job was simple. Check the study rooms, turn off the lights, make sure no one was still hiding out in the archives. Most nights I'd hum quietly to keep myself company. But that night, when I started humming, I could have sworn I heard someone else humming too. At first I thought it was the echo, the way sound bounces in a big empty building. But then it matched me. Same melody, same timing. I stopped. The echo didn't. That's when the power flickered. The overhead lights buzzed, dimmed, and for a few seconds everything turned an old sepia yellow, the color of aged paper. When the light steadied again, the clock above the front desk showed 11:57 p.m. That was impossible. I'd checked it a minute earlier. It had said 12:08. I shook it off. Maybe I was tired. Maybe I needed to finish faster. I walked down the main aisle, past the anthropology section, the one that always smelled faintly like rain and dust. My shoes echoed quietly across the linoleum. Every step I took stirred up a faint draft, like the air itself was shifting around me. When I reached the end of the aisle, something caught my eye. A shadow at the far end of the reference room. Someone was standing by the card catalog. It didn't make sense. I'd locked that door 20 minutes ago. "Hey, we're closed," I called out, my voice bouncing across the shelves. No response. The figure didn't move. I stepped closer, trying to sound calm. The overhead light hummed louder, that high, stuttering buzz fluorescent bulbs make when they're dying. When I got close enough to see, my heart sank. The person wasn't a person at all. It was a coat. A long gray coat hanging from one of the old wooden catalog drawers. Except, I hadn't hung it there. No one had. I reached out to touch it. The moment my fingers brushed the fabric, the lights behind me went out. One by one, each fluorescent tube snapped into darkness, leaving only the single lamp above the catalog burning. The air turned colder, sharp, sterile. From somewhere deep in the library, I heard the faint click of a typewriter. I hadn't heard that sound in years. Then a second click, and another. Slow, steady, and when I turned to look toward the sound, there was light coming from the basement stairwell. The basement was supposed to be locked after hours. That was part of the routine. I was the one who turned the key every night, right before leaving. So seeing the door slightly open, with that pale light bleeding through the crack, made every muscle in my body tense. I called out softly, "Hello? Is someone still down there?" No answer, only the rhythmic click of the typewriter, like someone was sitting in the dark, slowly punching the same key again and again. I hesitated at the top of the stairs, listening. The air drifting up from the basement was cool, colder than it should have been. It smelled like wet stone and paper that had been shut away too long. The lights above flickered once more, and when I glanced at the clock again, it still said 11:57. Exactly. No seconds ticking forward, just frozen. I gripped the railing and started down. The steps groaned under my weight, the sound echoing endlessly between the narrow walls. Halfway down, I noticed the posters pinned along the stairwell, the old library safety notices, faded to brown. But something was off. The university logo looked different, older, and the emergency number printed at the bottom wasn't the same. When I reached the basement door, I felt a vibration through the metal handle, faint, steady, like something mechanical running deep below. The typewriter sound was clearer now. Click, click, click. I pushed the door open. The basement looked exactly how it always did. Concrete floors, metal shelves, the smell of dust and cleaning supplies. Except for one thing. Every fluorescent light was on. All of them. The room glowed with a pale yellow haze, and in the center, between two rows of shelves, sat an old wooden desk. On it, a typewriter, and behind the desk, a woman. She was sitting perfectly still, hands resting over the keys, eyes fixed on the page. Her hair was gray and tied in a bun, her clothes old-fashioned, the kind of librarian uniform from black and white photos in the archives. "Ma'am," I said quietly, "the library's closed." No reaction. I stepped closer, my shoes squeaking against the floor. The paper in the typewriter was blank except for one repeated word, typed in a crooked line across the top. Stay. I looked back up at her. Her fingers twitched once, then again. Her nails were dark with ink, or maybe something worse. Then she spoke, voice soft but completely clear. "You shouldn't be here after midnight." A shiver ran straight down my spine, because the clock upstairs had said 11:57 since the lights first flickered. I was just locking up, I stammered. I didn't know anyone was still, but before I could finish, the sound of footsteps came from behind me. Slow, barefoot. I turned around. Someone else was coming down the stairs, except it was me. Same uniform, same ID badge, same flashlight dangling from my hand. And her, or my, face was completely blank. No eyes, no mouth. Just smooth gray skin, stretching where the features should have been. The woman at the desk began to type again. Click, click. Each letter appeared one by one on the paper in front of her. Stay, stay, stay. I stumbled backward, heart pounding so hard I could barely breathe. The other me, the faceless version, stood motionless halfway down the stairs, the dim light painting her outline in gold. She wasn't moving, just standing there, like she was waiting for me to do something first. The woman at the desk kept typing. Each click of the typewriter echoed across the shelves like a heartbeat. When I looked back at her, she was gone. The chair still spun slightly, as if she had just stood up. The word "stay" filled the page now, typed over and over until the letters bled through. The sound of the keys hadn't stopped. It was still coming from somewhere deeper in the basement. I bolted for the stairs. My flashlight beam shook violently across the walls. The faceless woman, or me, hadn't moved. She was still there on the last few steps, but as I ran closer, her body tilted slightly to the side. a puppet twitching out of sync. "Move," I whispered. "Please, move." She didn't. But her head turned toward me, impossibly slow, and I saw something shift beneath the smooth skin where her mouth should have been. I didn't wait to see more. I shoved past her, racing up the stairs 2 steps at a time. When I burst through the basement door, the lights upstairs were all off. Total darkness. The air felt wrong, thick and heavy, like the building itself was breathing. I turned my flashlight toward the hallway and froze. Every book on every shelf had been pulled halfway out, perfectly aligned, like hundreds of rectangular teeth, and every spine faced backward. I whispered, "This isn't real." The sound of my own voice didn't echo anymore. It was absorbed by the air, swallowed, like the walls were listening. I ran toward the front desk. The clock above it still said 11:57. The second hand was shaking violently in place, ticking but never moving forward. The exit door loomed ahead, but where the glass panes should have been, there was only smooth concrete. No handle, no push bar, just a door-shaped outline in the wall. The hum of the lights started again, low, slow, constant. I turned and saw the reading lamps flicker on one by one, illuminating the aisles. Between the rows of books, shadows moved, but not like people. They were tall and narrow, bending at strange angles, sliding between shelves that were too close together for anyone to fit. Then, one lamp at the far end flickered red. Not off, red. Like an emergency beacon. And I realized something that made my stomach drop. The sound of the typewriter was coming from that direction. Click, click, click. Each keystroke matched perfectly with the red flash. I took one step forward, shining my flashlight ahead. The air shimmered slightly, like heat waves, though it was freezing cold. On the floor, half covered in dust, lay another sheet of paper. Fresh ink. The letters uneven, but readable. "You're reading this too late." And beneath it, my own handwriting. My name. My signature. Written as if I'd signed out the very book that was typing the words itself. I dropped the paper. It fluttered to the floor, landing face down with a sound too loud for how light it was. My own signature burned behind my eyes. How could it be in my handwriting if I'd never written it? The red lamp ahead flickered twice, then went dark. For a heartbeat, the entire floor fell silent. Even the hum stopped. Then I heard whispering. Not from one place, from everywhere. Between shelves, behind the desk, inside the vents. 100 hushed voices murmuring, pages turning all at once. I spun around, shining the flashlight down the aisle. Each row of books shifted slightly, like something was brushing past from the other side. Covers thudded closed in sequence, thump, 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 moving toward me. I backed up until I hit the circulation desk. The computer monitor was on now, its screen glowing faint green. A single document filled the display. Title, Night Report, Staff Number 047. That was my employee ID. Lines of text began to appear on the screen by themselves. Employee observed abnormal occurrences at 11:57 p.m. Employee attempted to leave the premises. Employee is now part of the collection. I slammed the power button. The screen didn't turn off. Instead, the keyboard began to type by itself. Employee is reading this line now. The cursor blinked twice, then slowly typed one final word. Stay. I shoved the monitor off the desk. It crashed to the floor, sparks jumping out, the smell of burnt plastic filling the air. That's when I noticed the humming again. Only this time it wasn't electrical. It was coming from me. A low vibration in my chest, matching the rhythm that had filled the building all night. My flashlight dimmed. Its beam flickered across the nearest wall, where dozens of papers were taped in neat rows. Old staff schedules, incident reports, names. Every sheet ended with the same line. Employee status, retained. And halfway down the wall, among all those yellowed documents, was a Polaroid photo. Grainy, faded. It showed me, standing behind this same desk, smiling. But the date printed along the bottom said July 17th, 1973. I stepped back, my mind spinning. The same date that was on the car license plates in the parking garage story. I turned toward the exit again. The door was back now, glass panes gleaming softly. I could see daylight on the other side, students walking past, completely unaware. I sprinted. The ground under my feet shifted like wet paper, but I didn't care. I hit the door, pushed it open, and found myself staring into the basement. The same desk, the same typewriter, still clicking. And sitting behind it was the woman again. Only this time, she wasn't looking at the page. She was looking straight at me. Her eyes were gone, hollow black pits that reflected the typewriter's glow. She smiled, ink running down her chin like spilled words. And she whispered, almost kindly, "You can leave once you finish your story." Her voice didn't echo. It just hung in the air, heavy, warm, too close. "You can leave once you finish your story." I didn't understand what she meant, but as she spoke, the typewriter between us began to move again. The keys pressed themselves, one after another, slow and deliberate. Click, click, click. I glanced at the paper. Fresh words appeared in perfectly straight lines. She ran, but the library followed. The woman tilted her head, as if admiring her work. I stumbled backward, shaking my head. No, this isn't real. I'm not. But when I looked down at my hands, they were covered in dust. Gray, fine dust, like the kind that coats old books left untouched for decades. The humming in my chest grew louder, not coming from outside anymore, but from within the walls, the floor, the shelves. The whole building was breathing with me. I turned to run, desperate to find any direction that wasn't deeper inside. The basement hallway had changed. No stairs, no door, just rows of shelves stretching into the dark. I ran, between them, over them, knocking volumes to the floor. The air grew thicker, the lights dimmer, until the yellow glow above flickered like candlelight. Books slid out from the shelves on their own, landing open at my feet. Every page I saw had the same sentence printed over and over. She stayed. She stayed. She stayed. I screamed and kept running. Finally, I saw another light, a faint blue glow ahead, shifting like daylight through glass. An exit. It had to be. I reached it and shoved through. A gust of cool air hit my face. I blinked hard, eyes adjusting. I was standing in the front lobby. The same desk, the same clock, the same hallway beyond the doors. Everything looked normal. The clock ticked once, then again. 12:01 a.m. I exhaled, my body shaking with relief. I walked toward the glass doors, pushed them open, and stepped out into the night. Rain fell softly across the quad. Students hurried past under umbrellas, laughing, unaware of what had just happened. I turned back toward the library. From outside, it looked quiet, still. Only one light remained on. The window of the basement office, glowing faintly yellow. And in that light, I could see her. The old woman, sitting behind the typewriter, hands moving slowly. Something inside me told me to leave, to never come back. So I turned away. But as I did, a sound stopped me cold. Click, click, click. It was coming from my bag. I reached inside and pulled out a small object. Heavy, familiar. A typewriter key. Old. Metal. Stained with ink. The letter etched on it was S. And when I looked down, the front pocket of my uniform, the one where I kept my pen, was smeared black, like ink. Some places never close. They just wait for someone to finish the next page. When I was 16, my town smelled like metal. It came from the old textile factory down by the river, the one everyone called Garrity Mill. It had been shut down since the late 70s, but somehow the scent of oil and burnt cotton never really left the air. My dad used to work there before it closed. He'd tell me stories about the looms running day and night, the hum so constant that when you got home, you could still feel it vibrating in your bones. After it shut down, the company left everything behind. The machines, the uniforms, even the coffee mugs on the tables. Then the building was fenced off, condemned, and forgotten. At least, that's what we all thought. One summer night, my friends and I were bored enough to do something stupid. We'd heard rumors from kids at school that sometimes, if you drove past the factory after midnight, you could see lights on in the windows. Not all of them, just a few. flickering like someone was still working the night shift. We didn't believe it, so we decided to prove it wrong. It was me, my best friend Mitch, and two other guys from the neighborhood, Tyler and Ron. We snuck out around 11:30, drove Mitch's old pickup down to the river road, and parked across from the gates. The air smelled like rain and metal. The sky was a pale gray, the kind that makes everything look flat and colorless. Behind the fence, the factory loomed like a dead animal, enormous, silent, its windows dark except for one, faintly glowing yellow near the top floor. "Probably a reflection," I said. "From what?" Tyler asked. "The moon?" He was right. There was no moon that night. Mitch grinned, always the fearless one. "Let's go see." We slipped through a hole in the fence someone had already cut, our flashlights slicing through the weeds and broken glass. The closer we got, the louder the hum became. At first I thought it was the river, but no, it had rhythm, mechanical, steady. The sound of something still running. We entered through a side door that hung crooked on its hinges. The metal scraped the concrete floor as we pushed it open. Inside, the air was thick and dry, smelling of oil and dust. Our footsteps echoed off the high ceiling, mingling with the faint hum of old machinery. "This place is dead," Tyler muttered, but I wasn't so sure. There was a light coming from somewhere deeper inside, a pale yellow beam cutting through the dark, flashing every few seconds, like a warning signal. Mitch pointed toward it. "Let's check it out." We walked in silence, flashlights bouncing off walls covered in rust and peeling paint. The hum grew louder, and then, faintly, beneath the mechanical noise, we heard it. Music, a radio, an old tune, fuzzy with static, playing from somewhere far ahead. A man's voice singing softly. "You can clock out, anytime you like." We froze. No one spoke, because Garrity Mill had been shut down for 46 years. The song faded into static, then stopped altogether. The hum of machinery filled the silence again, steady and low, like a giant exhaling beneath the floor. "Someone's in here," Ron whispered. "Or something's still running," Mitch said. "Maybe generators." But there hadn't been electricity in this building for decades. The town had cut power after a fire in the late 70s. That's what made my stomach twist. We followed the light until we reached the main factory floor. The space opened up into a vast room full of rusted looms, conveyor belts, and hanging chains that swayed slightly, even though there was no wind. Our footsteps echoed like we were walking through the inside of a drum. And then, on the far wall, we saw it. A single industrial bulb, flickering from the ceiling above the supervisor's office. The glass windows of the office glowed yellow, casting faint reflections across the broken floor tiles. "Holy crap," Tyler whispered. "It's on," I said quietly. Mitch grinned. "Told you." Night shift. He started toward the office. I wanted to stop him, tell him this was far enough, that maybe it was some squatter with a generator, but I didn't. Something about that light pulled us forward. Halfway there, we passed a row of machines that looked almost alive. They weren't running, exactly, but their belts moved slightly, like breathing. The smell of burnt dust filled the air. On one of the tables lay a stack of paper time cards. I picked one up. The ink was smudged, but I could still make out the name. Employee number 41, night shift. Date, July 17th, 1973. Clock in, 11:57 p.m. Clock out. The card had never been punched out. I flipped through the others. They all ended the same way. Never clocked out, never finished the shift. Each one identical. And all with the same date. Mitch called out from ahead. "Guys, you need to see this." We joined him at the foot of the stairs leading to the supervisor's office. The door upstairs was slightly open, light spilling through the crack. Something clanked above us, a metal drawer sliding shut. "Hello?" I said, forcing my voice to sound steady. No answer. We climbed the stairs slowly. Each step groaned under our weight. The closer we got, the more I noticed a faint vibration through the handrail, like an engine idling somewhere deep in the walls. Mitch pushed the door open. Inside, the small office looked untouched. A desk sat in the center, perfectly clean except for a layer of dust. Papers were stacked neatly. On the desk stood an ancient punch clock, and next to it, a metal coffee mug. Steam still rose from it. Tyler whispered, "That's impossible." Ron reached out and touched the mug. He jerked his hand back. "It's hot." Then the hum cut out, all at once, like the entire building had stopped breathing. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. And in that silence, we heard the sound of footsteps, slow, dragging, coming from below us. One step, then another. I looked out the window and froze. Every machine on the factory floor was turning on. Belts spinning, lights flashing. The entire mill was waking up. And somewhere beneath the noise, I heard a voice on the old PA system. Crackled, distorted. A man's voice. "Employee number 41, clock in." The loudspeaker screeched again. A warped, metallic howl that made the hair on my neck stand straight. "Employee number 41, clock in." Then silence. The hum of machinery picked back up. Louder, stronger. The looms downstairs groaning to life. The belts spun faster until they screamed against rusted pulleys. We stood frozen, staring at each other, not sure if we should run or hide. Mitch grabbed my arm. "It's a prank," he hissed. "Someone wired this place up." But even he didn't sound convinced, because as he spoke, the light in the office flickered, and for just a second, the reflection in the glass wall behind him changed. There were 5 of us in the reflection, 5 shadows, and one of them was standing behind Mitch. I blinked, and it was gone, just 4 again. The radio on the desk crackled back to life, faint static turning into soft music. The same old tune we'd heard when we entered. "You can clock out, anytime you like." Mitch turned the dial off, but the music didn't stop. It just got louder. That's when the punch clock on the desk clicked. Its wheels spun by itself, gears grinding, and a fresh time card slid halfway out of the slot. Tyler leaned in to look. "It's blank," he whispered. Then, slowly, letters began to press into the paper, one by one, as if an invisible hand was punching it. "Employee number 41, clock in, 11:57 p.m. We all stared. No one spoke. Until I realized something. Mitch was standing closest to it. The time card was still sliding forward, and below the printed line new text appeared. Faint, shaky, like someone signing with trembling hands. Name, Mitchell Price. "Mitch," I whispered. He stared down at it, mouth open, pale as chalk. "That's not funny." None of us were laughing. Then the office lights turned red. A deep emergency red that flooded the windows, washing the entire factory floor below in color. The machines roared louder. The loudspeaker came on again, the same distorted voice repeating, "Employee number 41, clock in." Mitch backed away from the desk. "We're leaving, now." We bolted down the stairs, but halfway down, the lights flickered again, and Mitch wasn't behind us anymore. "Come on," I shouted, turning around. He was standing at the top of the stairs, staring into the office. The red light flashed across his face. "Mitch!" Tyler yelled. "Move!" He didn't move. Then the door slammed shut behind him. We ran back up, pounding on it, shouting his name. The handle was cold, locked from the inside. "Mitch! Open it!" No answer. Through the glass, I could see his shadow moving, slow, deliberate, back toward the desk. The punch clock clicked again, then a third time. The hum in the walls changed pitch, like something massive had just powered on. Tyler grabbed my shoulder. "We have to go." We ran. Down the stairs, through the aisles of churning machines, dodging swinging belts and the hiss of steam. The noise was unbearable. 100 engines screaming in unison. When we reached the side door, I turned back one last time. Through the upper window of the supervisor's office, I could see Mitch. He was sitting at the desk, head down, typing. And the lights in the entire factory floor below were strobing in rhythm with his keystrokes. Click, click, click. The sound followed us through the maze of machines. Click, click, click. Metal striking metal. Somewhere above us, the loudspeaker crackled again. Shift change in progress. Ron nearly tripped on a broken gear as we ran. Tyler yelled, "There, door," and pointed to an exit sign glowing faint green at the far wall. We sprinted for it. The air was hotter now. Steam hissed from the pipes, and the floor vibrated under our feet, as though the whole building were pulsing like a heart. Every machine was awake, their belts spinning in perfect rhythm. I slammed my shoulder into the door. It burst open. A rush of cold air hit my face. Relief, until I looked up. We weren't outside. We were standing in the same factory floor again. Same layout, same flickering lights, even the same wrench lying on the ground where Ron had dropped it minutes ago. Tyler's breathing turned ragged. No, we ran in a straight line. Ron started cursing under his breath, pulling at his hair. I just stood there, staring, my mind refusing to catch up. Employee number 41 is now on duty. The voice came again, softer this time, but everywhere at once. It echoed from the vents, the rafters, the walls themselves. Then, from the shadows near the far end of the floor, something moved. A figure stepped out between the machines, tall, wearing a gray coverall caked in dust. It walked with a limp, dragging one boot across the concrete, slow and steady. "Mitch," I whispered. The figure didn't answer. It just kept coming toward us. The light overhead flickered as it passed beneath, and for a second, I saw its face, pale, streaked with oil and grime. It looked like Mitch, but older. Wrong. Its eyes glowed faint yellow, the same color as the factory lights. "Don't," Tyler said quietly. "That's not him." Ron turned and ran down another aisle. I heard him scream a second later, short, sharp, then silence. The hum deepened, a bass note so low, I could feel it in my ribs. Machines all around us started to move again, faster now, their belts whirling like serpents. Tyler grabbed my arm. "We have to find another exit." We ran, weaving between the machines, dodging belts and hanging chains. The red lights above flashed in sequence, chasing us down the aisle. At the far end, I spotted a service elevator with its gate half open. We dove inside and pulled it shut. Tyler yanked the lever down. The lift shuddered and began to move, not smoothly, but with a grinding rhythm that matched the hum outside. As we rose, I looked through the gaps in the gate. The figure that looked like Mitch stood below us, head tilted back, watching. Its mouth was open, moving soundlessly, but over the roar of the factory I could still hear the words, "Clock in." The elevator stopped suddenly, jerking us forward. The gate rattled open onto a narrow hallway I'd never seen before, lined with gray doors, each marked employee records. Tyler was trembling. "We're not supposed to be here." The walls hummed like the inside of a generator, and at the very end of the hall, one door was open. Inside was a single light, and a desk with a logbook on it. Its cover was dusty, stamped with the Garrity Mill logo. I wiped the grime away and flipped it open. Page after page of handwritten names filled the log. Workers, dates, shift hours. Every page ended with the same date, July 17th, 1973. The last line was written in fresh ink. Employee number 41, status, active. Supervisor, signature, M. Price. The name burned in my vision, M. Price. Mitch, the ink was still wet. I touched it without thinking, and when I pulled my finger back, it came away black and warm, as if the page itself was bleeding. Tyler was whispering beside me. "We need to go. We need to go right now." But the air had changed again. The hum from the walls had deepened into something closer to breathing. Slow, heavy, pulling in and out. The lights above flickered red, then white, then red again, like the whole factory was running on a pulse. I turned the next page and froze. There were 2 new entries being written in real time. The pen moved across the paper by itself, the nib scratching out words that formed one after another. Employee number 42, clock in, 11:57 p.m. Employee number 43, clock in, 11:57 p.m. I stared at them, my mouth dry. Numbers 42 and 43. Me and Tyler. I dropped the book and ran. The hallway behind us stretched longer than before, the doors repeating, records, 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 as though the building was folding over itself. The elevator was gone. In its place, only a staircase leading down. Tyler grabbed my wrist. Which way? I didn't answer. There was no right direction anymore. Then the loudspeaker came back on. Shift change complete. All employees, report to your stations. The humming grew to a roar. I could hear the factory coming alive again below. The looms, the chains, the conveyor belts, all moving in unison like one massive breathing thing. Tyler bolted for the stairs. Come on! We ran down, and the air got hotter with every step. By the time we reached the bottom, my skin felt slick, like the heat was seeping straight from the floor. We burst out onto the main floor. The machines were all spinning now. Belts snapping, gears whirring, lights flashing across the walls. But there were people here too, dozens of them. Men and women in gray coveralls, faces blank with soot, moving in rhythm with the machines. Not speaking, not blinking, just working. Every one of them turned toward us in perfect unison as we entered. Dozens of pairs of eyes glowing faint yellow, and in the middle of the floor stood Mitch. He was clean now, uniform crisp, badge pinned neatly to his chest. He smiled when he saw us, that same easy grin he used to have when we were kids sneaking into abandoned places. Right on time, he said. His voice was calm, steady, but it carried through the entire room as if the building itself was speaking with him. I tried to speak, but no words came out. Mitch nodded toward the wall behind him. There were 2 new lockers, metal and gray, with fresh paint. Each one had a brass tag on the door. Number 42, number 43. Tyler whispered, No, that's not us. Mitch stepped closer. His eyes flickered yellow in the light. Everybody has to clock in, he said softly. It's the rule. He lifted the punch clock from the desk beside him, holding it in his hands like an offering. It was spotless, not a speck of rust. 2 blank cards waited in the slots. I grabbed Tyler's arm and backed away, but the floor beneath us shifted, the tiles sliding like conveyor belts, moving us forward no matter how hard we fought. The machines screamed louder, the lights went white, and the last thing I saw was Mitch pressing the lever down, the punch clock stamping our cards with a sound like thunder. Click, click, then silence. I woke up to daylight streaming through the cracked windows. The factory was quiet again, dead, dust settling in the air. Tyler was gone, so was Mitch. I stumbled outside, blinking against the sun, the hum still ringing faintly in my ears. When I turned back, the windows were dark. No movement, no lights, just a dead building on the river. For a moment, I almost convinced myself it was a dream, until I got home and emptied my pockets. There was a metal name tag inside, small, gray, stamped with fading letters. Employee number 42. And beneath it, in smaller print, Garrity Mill, night shift. I do that, but if some jobs don't end when the factory closes, some shifts keep running, until someone new clocks in. I used to think working in tech meant freedom. Flexible hours, coffee on tap, quiet nights where no one bothers you. But after what happened at Brighton Tower, I can't even step into an elevator without feeling sick. I was the night system technician, the only one who volunteered to work alone after midnight. Fewer interruptions, more pay, and besides, the building was always empty. At least, it was supposed to be. Brighton Tower had 11 floors, or that's what the blueprints said. Every tenant, every directory sign, every emergency map, they all stopped at floor 11. But the elevator had a button for 12. I noticed it my first week there. It wasn't lit up like the others, just a faint, dull outline where the number should have been. I asked the building manager about it. He just laughed and said, "Old system glitch. That floor doesn't exist." Except I'd seen it flash once, just for a second. That night started like any other. The office lights dimmed automatically at 10 p.m. I sat at my desk, sipping stale coffee, staring at lines of code that all blurred together. The hum of the server room on the lower floor vibrated faintly through the concrete. The sound was oddly comforting, a mechanical heartbeat. Around midnight, I noticed something strange. The building's network map showed a new access point online. ID 12F_main node. At first, I thought it was a test server, but when I pinged it, it responded instantly, with a local IP, meaning it was physically inside the building. Floor 12. I stared at the screen for a full minute before deciding it had to be an old ghost entry, maybe left over from a system merge. Still, I couldn't shake the curiosity, so I took my keycard and walked to the elevator. The hallway was dead quiet. The light above the elevator door flickered weakly, switching between L and 11, as if confused. I pressed the button. The doors opened immediately. Inside, the control panel glowed faint blue. All the buttons from lobby to 11 were lit normally. And there it was, 12. Faint, gray, unmarked, as though someone had tried to remove it but failed. I pressed it. Nothing happened. Then, after a few seconds, the elevator began to move, upward. There was no sound of cables or pulleys, just a smooth, silent ascent, like floating. When it stopped, the doors slid open to a hallway I'd never seen before. Dim fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting pale reflections across a gray carpet. Everything looked clean, maintained, except there were no numbers on the doors, just identical black plaques. And at the end of the hall, a single light still on inside one of the offices. The air on floor 12 felt wrong. Not stale or dusty like you'd expect in a place that hadn't been used. It smelled clean, too clean, like disinfectant and cold metal. I stepped out of the elevator, half expecting the motion sensors to flick on brighter lights. They didn't. Only the single row of fluorescents buzzed overhead, flickering every few seconds in rhythm with the hum of the building's power. The hallway stretched ahead, lined with glass-walled offices. Desks, chairs, computers that shouldn't have had power, screens faintly glowing blue with the company's old logo. Brighton Technologies. The company had dissolved 8 years ago. My flashlight beam jittered as my hand shook. I could see paperwork neatly stacked on some of the desks, pens resting across open notebooks as if someone had just stepped out for coffee. There was even a cup on one of the tables, still half full. Steam rose from it. That was impossible. I pulled out my phone to take a picture. The screen flickered violently, then shut off. No signal, no battery indicator. Just a blank gray glow. The elevator behind me dinged. I turned around fast. The doors had closed. No light on the panel. I was alone. I started down the hall, telling myself I'd just take a quick look and get out. The first office door opened easily. Inside was a standard cubicle layout. Phones, filing cabinets, old monitors. A stack of printed memos sat on the desk nearest me. The top page was dated July 17th, 2015. The ink was faded, but the header read, Internal Notice, Floor 12, Transition. All employees are reminded to remain at their stations during the migration process. Unscheduled departures will disrupt system integrity. That didn't make sense. There was no migration process in 2015. Brighton had gone bankrupt in 2013. I dropped the memo and backed away. That's when I heard typing. Soft, rhythmic. From the next office over. I froze, every nerve in my body lighting up. It wasn't an echo. It wasn't random. It was deliberate. I edged toward the glass wall, careful not to breathe too loudly. Through the blinds I saw movement, the faint silhouette of someone sitting at a desk, shoulders hunched, fingers moving quickly over a keyboard. A low monitor glow illuminated their face just enough for me to make out pale skin and dark hair. They looked normal, human. "Hello?" I said. No reaction. The typing stopped. Then, after a pause, the voice that answered was calm, flat. "You're not supposed to be here." Something about the way they said it made my skin crawl. It wasn't angry. It sounded automated. "Sorry," I said, forcing a laugh. "I'm just IT. I must have taken the wrong..." They stood up. The blinds rippled as the figure moved toward the door. I took a step back. The handle turned. Slowly. I braced myself, ready to bolt, but the lights flickered again, and in that split second the office went dark. When the bulb steadied, the room was empty. Chair pushed in. Monitor off. No sign of anyone. Only one thing had changed. The glass was covered in fingerprints. Hundreds of them, pressed from the inside. I stumbled backward until my shoulder hit the opposite wall. My breath came out in short, shallow bursts. The fingerprints covered every inch of the glass. Layered, smudged, some so deep they looked burned into the surface. I turned and ran. I didn't care about my job, about the data, about the network. I just needed to get back to the elevator. The hallway stretched longer than I remembered. Each row of offices looked the same. Glass, empty desks, faint blue glow from dormant screens. But as I passed, a few monitors flickered on by themselves. Lines of text appeared, one word per line. Run, run, run. I sprinted faster. When I finally reached the elevator, the panel was dark. The call button didn't light up when I pressed it. I hit it again and again, but the only response was the soft buzz of power somewhere deep behind the wall. Then, slowly, the display above the door changed. It didn't show numbers anymore, just words. Level, system. The doors opened. Inside, the lights were dim, pale red, like the glow of an old emergency bulb. The air smelled like hot metal and dust. I stepped inside anyway. The moment I did, the doors slammed shut behind me. The elevator shuddered once, then began to move. But not up, not down. It felt like sideways. The hum grew louder, the lights flickering faster, until everything outside the small window was just a smear of motion. When it stopped, the door opened with a sound that didn't belong in a building, more like the tearing of fabric. I stepped out into another hallway. Same carpet, same walls, but all the lights were off except one, far at the end. And this time, there were people. At least, I thought they were. Figures sat at desks on either side of the hall, motionless, facing glowing monitors. Their screens displayed lines of code, repeating endlessly. Return to work, return to work, return to work. Their heads tilted slightly with each flicker of light, as though the code itself was breathing through them. I whispered, "Hey, are you okay?" No response. I edged closer to one of them, a man in a white shirt, sleeves rolled up. His monitor reflected off his glasses. His face was gray, stiff. I tapped his shoulder, cold, solid. Then his head turned toward me. Not fast, not slow, but exactly 90 degrees, like a hinge. His mouth opened. A faint voice came out, layered and distorted, like multiple recordings stacked on top of each other. "You're late." I stumbled back, knocking into another desk. That worker turned too, then another, and another, all in perfect unison. Their voices joined, whispering through static. "Clock in. Clock in. Clock in." The lights above buzzed violently, casting everything in strobe flashes of white and red. And in those flashes, I saw the walls around me peeling. Layers of wallpaper tearing away to reveal old brick, rusted pipes, and finally, nothing. Just open space. I ran. The hall stretched ahead endlessly, every door the same, every voice chasing me. My footsteps sounded like typing now. Short, sharp, mechanical. Then suddenly, the elevator door appeared again. The display read, 12. Only 12. I slammed the button and threw myself inside. The doors shut. The hum started again, deeper this time, almost comforting. The numbers on the display began to scroll. 11, 10, 9. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Then the elevator stopped. The doors opened, and I was still on floor 12. Only now, the desks were gone. The hallway was empty. And in the middle of the floor, a single terminal glowed in the dark. The screen displayed one line, "Welcome back, employee number 41. The glow from the terminal pulsed faintly, like it was breathing. "Welcome back, employee number 41. I stared at the words, my chest tight. "Who are you?" I whispered, half expecting a reply, half praying I wouldn't get one. The cursor blinked. Then, slowly, letters began to appear, one by one. Supervisor online. Question, reason for absence. Absence? I hadn't worked here in my life. Brighton Technologies was dead before I even graduated. I typed back, hands trembling on the keyboard. "I'm not an employee. I'm leaving." The cursor paused. Then the reply came instantly. "Incorrect. You never left. Every light in the hallway blinked off at once. The only illumination came from the screen, casting a cold blue glow over my hands. Somewhere above me, I heard the elevator ding. Soft calm. Too calm. I turned toward the sound. The door was open again. A faint shadow stood inside. Tall, human-shaped, motionless. Its head brushed the ceiling. Then the intercom above me crackled to life. Employee number 41. It was the same voice I'd heard on the PA in the factory stories. Low, mechanical, drawn out, as if spoken through layers of tape. Your workstation is waiting. I'm not, I started to yell, but the lights flashed again, cutting me off. Now the terminal was typing by itself, line after line spilling down the screen. Clock in, 11:57 p.m. Floor, 12. Status, active. I backed away. My shoes stuck slightly to the carpet. When I looked down, I realized it wasn't carpet anymore. It was gray fabric, stretched tight like skin, pulsing faintly under my feet. The voice spoke again, closer this time, coming from the walls themselves. You applied for the position, remember? I shook my head. No, I didn't. You came up here. You pressed the button. That's a contract. The air vibrated. The hum in the walls rose until it matched my heartbeat. I ran. Past the empty desks, past the glass offices that no longer had reflections. My flashlight flickered, catching glimpses of shapes moving inside the walls. Silhouettes walking in endless lines, like reflections on an invisible surface. Everywhere I turned, the same word appeared, printed on the monitors, stenciled on the walls, glowing faintly above the exit signs. STAY. The elevator was still open, the shadow gone now. I jumped inside and hit L again and again. The doors closed. The display scrolled down. 11, 10, 9, 8. The hum grew fainter, then stopped. The doors opened. I stepped out into a floor I didn't recognize. Rows of cubicles stretched in both directions, endless gray partitions fading into the distance. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and every computer screen displayed the same black window with one line of white text. Processing new hire. A phone rang on one of the desks nearby. Just one. Loud in the silence. I picked it up with shaking hands. Hello? Static hissed for a second, then a voice, flat, calm, said, "Welcome to floor 12." The line went dead. The phone slipped from my hand and clattered onto the desk. The sound echoed far longer than it should have, like the room was hollow inside. Then everything went quiet again. No hum, no air conditioning, just the fluorescent lights buzzing softly, flickering in perfect rhythm. I took a step forward. Every computer monitor on the floor turned toward me, or at least that's how it looked. The glow shifted, aligning with my movement, as if the entire system was watching. I whispered, "What do you want from me?" One screen blinked. Words began to appear in clean white font. Continuity. The system requires presence. I backed away slowly. Presence? Of who? The cursor blinked twice. Your position is vacant. Before I could respond, the rest of the screens began typing too. Hundreds of them. Lines of text filling faster than I could read. Employee number 41. Assimilating. Status. Returning. Date. July 17th, 1973. I froze. That date again. The same one from the factory logs. The same one from the library files. Every story I'd heard whispered around the company. About people who'd worked here before the bankruptcy. About how Brighton Tower used to be a textile plant decades earlier. Was it all the same place? I turned toward the elevator, heart hammering. The doors were open again. But now, instead of the control panel, there was a wall of old punch cards, thousands of them, yellowed and brittle, each with a stamped date and name. I leaned closer. The top card read, Employee number 40. Clock in, 11:57 p.m. Clock out. The one beneath it was newer. Employee number 41. Name, blank. Clock in, 11:57 p.m. My hand shook as I reached for it. The ink on the name line shimmered faintly, like wet paint. Then the pen beside the slot rolled by itself and pressed against the card. It began to write. Letter by letter. My name. I screamed and ripped the card out, crumpling it in my hand. The building groaned around me, lights flashing, alarms blaring, as if I'd broken some rule I didn't understand. The voice returned, no longer calm. Employee number 41 has not clocked out. The elevator's light turned red. Every door on the floor opened at once, slamming into the walls. Inside each office stood a figure, pale, blurred, their faces missing features, their hands twitching as they turned toward me in perfect synchronization. The air was filled with the faint, steady sound of typing. I ran. Down the endless rows of cubicles, past the walls that seemed to breathe, back toward the elevator, the only light left. I threw myself inside just as the figures started moving. The doors closed an inch from my face. The display above read only one word: exit. I hit the button. The elevator dropped. The lights went out. The hum stopped. Everything fell silent. When the doors finally opened, I stepped into the lobby of Brighton Tower. Morning light spilled through the glass windows. Security guards chatted by the desk. People walked past outside. Everything was normal. I stumbled out, gasping, my clothes soaked in sweat. One of the guards looked at me, frowning. You okay, man? You look like you've seen a ghost. I turned toward the elevator to answer, but the panel had changed. Where the buttons used to be, there were only 11 floors. No 12. And yet, as I stared, faint numbers flickered across the display screen above the door. 11, 12, 11, 12, 11. The light steadied on 12, then faded to black. That night, when I checked my work inbox at home, there was a single unread email. No subject line, no sender. The timestamp read 11:57 p.m. The body contained just one sentence: please remember to clock out. So in response, it was also to give to one. Some buildings never close, they just keep the lights on, waiting for someone to finish the shift. I used to think hospitals never slept. Even at 3 a.m., there's always someone moving. A nurse checking vitals, a janitor pushing a mop, the low hum of machines keeping time with human hearts. But some parts of a hospital do sleep, and some never wake up. I worked maintenance at St. Hollow Medical Center for 6 years. It's a big, ugly concrete block on the edge of town. Half of it modern, half of it older than it should be. Everyone on staff knew about the West Wing, the section that had been sealed off since the early 2000s after a structural fire. It was supposed to be rebuilt, but the funding never came. Still, sometimes, when I was on the night shift, the elevator panel would light up with the floor number that led there. A place the system said didn't exist. I'd always ignore it. Until last month. It was a Sunday night, dead quiet. Storm outside, wind howling against the windows like someone begging to come in. I was checking boiler pressure on level B2 when the radio clipped to my belt crackled alive. A woman's voice came through, calm, practiced, the way only nurses sound. Code blue, room 19, West Wing. I froze. The radio shouldn't even receive calls from that channel anymore. It had been deactivated years ago. Repeat, I said into the mic, my own voice shaking. Say again, what location? Static. Then the same voice. Code blue, room 19. I climbed the stairs 2 at a time to the main level. The hallway lights flickered under the thunder outside. Everything looked normal. Nurses at their stations, monitors beeping faintly. Hey, I said to Carla, the head nurse. You guys just call a code blue for West Wing? She frowned. West Wing? No, honey. That place is sealed up. Has been for 20 years. I showed her my radio. She laughed nervously. Maybe you picked up an old broadcast or something. But the thing about radio is, it doesn't play recordings. It plays what's live. The call came again, louder this time, filling the hallway speakers overhead. Code blue, room 19, West Wing. Immediate response required. Every nurse turned toward the ceiling like they'd just heard a ghost. Carla's face went pale. That system isn't connected to PA anymore, she whispered. That line was cut. And that's when I noticed something down the corridor. The red exit light above the emergency stairwell flickered twice, and then the door beneath it, the one that hadn't opened in years, clicked, unlocked. The stairwell door groaned as I pulled it open. A blast of cold, sterile air rushed out, the kind of chill that smells like disinfectant and old metal. The lights inside flickered, one every few steps, stretching downward into darkness. I hesitated, half expecting someone to yell at me for even touching that door. But the hallway behind me was dead silent. Even Carla had disappeared. I gripped my flashlight and started down. The stairwell echoed with each step, a hollow, metallic sound that seemed to follow half a beat behind me, like something else was walking too. When I reached the landing, I saw it. A rusted metal sign bolted to the wall. West Wing, Patient Care Level. Someone had spray painted a thick black X over it years ago, but the letters still showed through. The door to the wing itself was half open. Dim light spilled through the crack, steady and warm. Not the harsh fluorescent glare of modern hospital lights. It looked like the soft glow of old bulbs. I stepped through. The hallway on the other side was pristine. Too pristine. No dust, no cobwebs. The walls freshly painted, the floor waxed to a shine. Every overhead light was on. Machines hummed faintly from the rooms on both sides. I walked slowly, heart thudding. Each door had a nameplate beside it. Patient names, handwritten in black ink. Room 11, Harper, M. Room 12, Sanders, J. Room 13, Wells, T. Every one had a faint glow leaking through the glass window in the door. Monitors blinking, IV pumps clicking softly. None of this was possible. The entire wing had been gutted after the fire. "Maintenance," I called out, my voice shaking. "Anybody down here?" No answer. Just the faint rhythm of machines and the low hum of air vents. As I passed room 17, I caught something out of the corner of my eye. A shadow. Someone was standing inside, motionless, back turned to me. A nurse, at least that's what it looked like. White uniform, dark hair pulled into a bun. I tapped the glass lightly. "Hey, you're not supposed to be here." She didn't move, didn't even twitch. The hallway lights flickered once, twice, and in that half-second darkness her head turned. Not all the way, just enough for me to see one pale eye staring through the glass. Then the lights steadied again. The room was empty. I stumbled backward until I hit the opposite wall. My radio crackled to life. "Code Blue, Room 19, West Wing." It was louder this time. So loud the static bled through the speakers. I followed the sound down the corridor, passing more rooms that all looked occupied but held no one. Beds pressed, IVs filled, monitors beeping quietly. Every display showed the same number, 11:57 p.m. When I reached the end of the hall, the door to room 19 was open. The lights inside glowed soft yellow, and on the bed lay a patient, an older man, eyes closed, face peaceful, hooked up to monitors that shouldn't have had power. The heartbeat line on the screen pulsed steady and slow. Then it flatlined. Beep. The intercom above me spoke again, almost in a whisper. "Time of death, 11:57 p.m. Begin documentation." And behind me, I heard footsteps. Soft, deliberate, coming closer down the hall. The footsteps were slow, measured, almost gentle, like a nurse walking during night rounds. I turned toward the sound, flashlight trembling in my hand. The beam stretched down the corridor, catching glimpses of empty wheelchairs, open doors, glinting metal rails. But no one was there. Still, the footsteps didn't stop. They echoed closer, then paused just behind me. "Who's there?" I whispered. Nothing. Just the faint buzz of the ceiling lights and the steady tone of the flatlined monitor. I turned back to the bed. The man's eyes were open now. Wide. Great. He wasn't breathing, but he was looking at me. For a few seconds, neither of us moved. Then the monitor beside him flickered back to life, the heartbeat line twitching erratically before stabilizing again. Beep, beep, beep. The patient exhaled, slow and ragged, like someone remembering how to breathe. His lips moved, barely forming words. Clock in. I stumbled backwards so hard I hit the wall. What? He turned his head slightly. neck cracking like paper being folded. Clock in. Then his gaze shifted toward the open door, as if something behind me had entered. I spun around. The hallway had changed. The walls weren't smooth anymore. They were lined with metal doors, each labeled "Records Storage" in faded paint. The air felt colder, heavier, and I could hear the distant rumble of machinery beneath the floor, like the sound of massive engines running far below. I started to run. Every door I passed was identical, and yet, each one led back into the same hallway. No matter which handle I turned, I came out at the same place. My radio crackled again, that same calm female voice now whispering directly into my ear. "Maintenance, please report to the lower level." "No," I hissed. "You're not real. None of this is lower level. Room 19B. The lights flickered red, then white, then red again. Down the hall, I saw an elevator, one I hadn't noticed before. Its door stood open, light spilling out, and the floor indicator read B-West. Something in me, curiosity, fear, I don't know, pushed me toward it. I stepped inside. The door closed. The floor number didn't move. Instead, a small monitor above the buttons flickered on, displaying a live feed of the hospital hallways. Every camera showed the same scene: empty corridors, flickering lights, and a single figure walking slowly from one frame to another. The woman in the nurse's uniform. Her steps echoed even through the static, and in every frame she passed, the clocks on the wall all showed 11:57 p.m. Then one feed changed. It showed room 19 again. The patient's bed was empty, but someone else was lying on it now. Wearing my uniform, the monitor beeped once, then flatlined. Beep. The intercom whispered. Time of death, 11:57 p.m. Begin documentation. The elevator doors opened to darkness. Cold air rushed in. Thick, damp, metallic, like I'd stepped into the lungs of the building itself. I lifted my flashlight. The beam cut through drifting dust and revealed a corridor that didn't look like any hospital level I'd ever seen. The walls weren't painted white or tiled. They were raw concrete, streaked with rust. Pipes ran along the ceiling, dripping water into puddles that rippled when the fluorescent lights buzzed. Signs hung crooked on the walls. Morgue storage, restricted access. Archive B, West. The intercom crackled again. Maintenance. Proceed to room 19B. The voice was closer now. No static this time, almost warm. I followed the sound, trying to convince myself that this was still part of the hospital. An old section, maybe forgotten during renovations. But the deeper I went, the less it felt like a place built by people. The floor sloped gently downward, and the air grew colder. Somewhere far below, machinery hummed. Deep, mechanical, steady. It reminded me of the industrial noise I'd heard as a kid, standing outside my father's old factory. When I reached the end of the hall, I saw a steel door marked 19B. Fresh paint. The handle gleamed. I hesitated, then pushed it open. The room inside wasn't what I expected. It wasn't a morgue. It was an office. An old one. Metal desk, filing cabinets, a flickering lamp on the corner, and a single computer screen glowing green in the dark. The monitor displayed a familiar interface, an ancient hospital database, the kind that should have been retired decades ago. A single line blinked at the top. Patient records, West Wing. Below it, a list of names, hundreds of them, all with the same admission date, July 17th, 1973. My stomach turned. The next column showed discharge times, almost all blank, except the bottom entry. Name, Thomas R. Hale. Role, maintenance technician. Admission date, July 17th, 1973. Status, active. My name, my job title. The date wasn't right. It couldn't be. I scrolled further down, my hands shaking. At the very bottom of the list was one last field. Time of death, 11:57 p.m. The cursor blinked once. Then, like something was typing on its own, new text appeared. Confirm? I whispered. No. The lights in the room dimmed. The monitor flickered. A faint heartbeat sound began to echo through the floor. Not from any machine, but from the walls themselves. The voice came again, this time behind me. The same calm female tone I'd heard on the intercom. Documentation required. I turned around. The nurse stood in the doorway. Her uniform was spotless, her face pale and soft in the dim light. But her eyes were gone. Just smooth skin, like someone had covered them with wax. She tilted her head. "Clock in, Mr. Hale. I'm not supposed to be here," I stammered. "You've been here," she said gently. "You just forgot." She held something out in her hand, a metal ID badge, dull and scratched. The hospital logo etched on the front, and beneath it, Employee number 41, St. Hollow Medical Center. When I didn't take it, she smiled faintly. Everyone forgets their number, eventually. And then, before I could speak, the monitor beeped once more. Flatline. Beep. The sound of the flatline filled the room. Steady. Endless. The nurse didn't move. She just stood there, holding the badge out like an offering. I wanted to run, to shove past her, to wake up from this. But when I reached for the door, the hallway outside had changed again. It wasn't concrete anymore. It was linoleum. Clean. Bright. The same sterile white hallways as the rest of St. Hollow. For a second, I almost believed I'd made it out. The nurse smiled. That same patient, gentle smile. "Back to work, Mr. Hale." And then she was gone. I stumbled out into the hall. Everything looked normal. The lights no longer flickered. Machines hummed softly behind closed doors. Somewhere, a janitor's cart squeaked across the floor. When I looked back, the door to 19B was gone. In its place was a vending machine, humming quietly. I walked toward the elevators, every muscle trembling. The display read L, normal, real. When the doors opened, I nearly cried. A nurse was inside, young, earbuds in, scrolling her phone. She glanced up, startled. "You okay, sir? You look pale." "Yeah," I lied, stepping in beside her. "Just wrong floor." She smiled politely, pressed the button for the lobby, and the doors closed. Soft elevator music played. For the first time in hours, or maybe years, I felt safe. When the doors opened, I stepped out into the bright hospital entrance. Morning sunlight spilled through the glass. People lined up for coffee. Security guards chatted. The world was alive again. I checked my watch. The hands weren't moving. It still read 11:57 p.m. I turned to ask the nurse what time it really was, but she was gone. The elevator doors had already closed. I walked to the front desk, trying to steady my breathing. Behind the counter sat a man I didn't recognize. Older, gray hair, thick glasses. He smiled. "Can I help you, sir?" "Yeah," I said. "I work here. Maintenance. I think I got turned around. What day is it?" He frowned slightly. "Sir, St. Hollow hasn't had a maintenance department since 1983. I blinked. "That's not possible. I was just downstairs, room 19B. His expression froze. "Where did you say?" "Room 19B, in the West Wing." He stood up slowly. "Sir, the West Wing was demolished 40 years ago, after the fire in July of 1973. My throat went dry. I was just there. The lights are on. The machines. He picked up the phone, dialed a number I couldn't hear, and whispered something to someone. Then he hung up and forced a nervous smile. "Why don't you sit down, Mr. Hale?" I said automatically. "Thomas Hale." His face went completely white. "I'll call someone to come help you, Mr. Hale." I turned around. Every clock on the lobby wall read 11:57 p.m. The intercom clicked on overhead. Static hissed, followed by a calm female voice. "Code Blue, room 19, West Wing." The guards froze. The receptionist dropped his pen. Everyone stared up at the ceiling. The voice came again. "Immediate response required." And this time, I heard something else layered beneath it. Faint, buried in static. A second voice, male, familiar. "Mine. I'll take it." Every day is a no way that they work down. Some emergencies never end. They just wait for the next response. Maybe that's what makes these stories so disturbing. They didn't happen in haunted castles. They happened in places we trust: parking garages, libraries, offices, hospitals, spaces built for comfort that somehow forgot how to feel human. Every echo in an empty hallway, every flicker of a light that should have been off, every door that opens when it shouldn't. They're all reminders that normal places can turn wrong, and once they do, they never quite turn back. So if you ever find yourself somewhere that feels just a little off, don't stay too long. Some places notice when you do.